In this week's staff, the Olam's Baruch Hashem moving along, so it's a little ahead of the pace, but the Olam seems to be holding Daf Yud Beis. The Mishnah on Yud Beis Amad Beis, Shitas Beis Shammai, that even though you could be mafresh Challah on Yom Tif, on Shabbos you cannot be mafresh Challah. Different reasons, but you cannot be mafresh Challah on Shabbos. Yom Tif you could. However, Zok Beis Shammai, even though you can be mafresh the Challah, you can't give it to the Kohen. The hafrasha you're allowed to do because it's considered Eichel Nefesh. You need to be able to eat the Challah, the dough. You have to be mafresh Challah, it's mutter. But giving it to the Kohen, which means carrying the Hoitzah, is shaloi l'tzorech. You can do it after Yom Tif. The mele the hafrasha you're allowed to do, the nesini you're not allowed to do. That's the Mishnah. And how Rashi explains, the hafrasha you could do, the nesini you can't do. In the Iker Mitzvah of Challah, which is this Mishnah as well as also this week's Parshas Shelach, the Mitzvah of Challah, the Rambam in Sefer Mitzvahs, Shiur Yud Beis, has an important klal in counting Taryag Mitzvahs. You see, L'mashal the Avodah in the Beis Hamikdash, there was Shchita, Halacha, Zrika, skipped Kabbalah, Haktorah. Zok the Rambam, that you don't count each of the avodas for a separate mitzvah. It's all one big mitzvah with a bunch of parts. And the Rambam goes through a lot of different mitzvahs where you find that, including matnas kahuna, Challah. Challah, there's one part of the mitzvah is the hafrasha, and there's another part which is the nesina. These two parts to the mitzvah, there's hafrasha and there's nesina. Taking off, being mafresh Challah, and giving to the Kohen. So the Rambam says it's not two mitzvahs, it's one mitzvah that has two parts. And for that, Beis Shammai says, in this one mitzvah, one part of the mitzvah you could do, which means the hafrasha, because if you're not going to be mafresh, you can't eat the Challah. But nesina, to carry it to the Kohen, hoitzah on Yom Tif, shaloi l'tzorech, that you can't do. That's the Shitas Rambam. The Ramban over there in Sefer Mitzvahs argues on the Rambam, and the Ramban says no. It's two separate mitzvahs. These are mitzvah of hafrasha, and these are mitzvah of nesina. Even if you don't give it to the Kohen, you mafresh and you keep the Challah for yourself, it may be gezel because you're supposed to give it to the Kohen, but you makayim the mitzvah of hafrasha. There's another mitzvah of nesina to the Kohen, giving it to the Kohen. And that mitzvah is a separate mitzvah. It's not two mitzvahs in the Taryag mitzvahs, two separate mitzvahs in the Taryag mitzvahs. It's all under the category of the mitzvah of Challah, but the mitzvah of Challah has two mitzvahs. Even if you the Ramban that these Taryag mitzvahs, the count of Taryag mitzvahs, one of them is Challah. But in the mitzvah of Challah, these two separate mitzvahs, one mitzvah of Afrasha, one mitzvah of Nesina. And for that, Zokt our Mishnah over here in Beis Shammai, the mitzvah of Afrasha you could do. The mitzvah of Nesina, a separate mitzvah you can't do, because you could do it after Yom Tif. The Ramban has three rayas to what he says, that in the mitzvah of Afrasha of Challah, it's a separate, there's a mitzvah of Afrasha and there's a mitzvah of Nesina. The Ramban has three rayas. Number one, we make a bracha on the Hafrasha. You make a bracha, kapasuk in the Shulchan Aruch. It's a Mishnah in Challah Perek Aleph. You make a bracha on the Hafrasha of Challah. So the Ramban says, if it's all one mitzvah, and if you're going to do the Nesina a few days later, how could you make the bracha? Whether if it's not oivel asiyasa, or you don't make a bracha on the asiyah when you're not going to be makayim the whole mitzvah right away. From this that we make a bracha on hafrasha. Al karchach, the hafrasha by itself is a mitzvah. So raya to what the Ramban says is that there's a separate mitzvah of hafrasha besides giving it to the kohen. Hafrasha itself is a mitzvah. V'oid, says the Ramban, a kohen and a Levi that's mafresh challah, they have to be mafresh challah, clearly, because it's tevel before they take off challah. There's no dinesina, and the kohen makes a bracha. So you see that there's a mitzvah bifnei atzmo yav afrasha. A kohen does not do nesina. A kohen takes off the challah. You have to be careful with that challah. He's dinim not to eat it petuma, but there's no din nesina. He has to give it to his other hand. There's no pashtus. There's no din nesina. And you make a bracha. So Zok the Ramban, it's a riot to what I'm saying, that the afrasha itself is a mitzvah, and that's why a kohen can make a bracha on the afrasha. It could be the Rambam would say it's taka one big mitzvah, and when the kohen's mafresh, that itself, by him having it, is the nesina. But Kapam, the Rabban says, v'harai, it's two mitzvahs, you can make a bracha on the afresh even if you don't have the nesina. Very clear. V'oid, the Gemara in B'chayris, Daf Chav Zayin Amud Aleph, if you have a dough that's tamei, you still have to take off challah, you mafresh challah with a bracha, and you don't give it to the kohen because it's tamei. You burn it. So you see, Dr. Amman Vaita, that is a mitzvah v'fnei atzmei of hafrasha. So we have over here Shitas Ramban, that is a mitzvah of hafrasha, taking off the dough. When you have a dough, you take off a piece of dough, one mitzvah, and then there's a separate mitzvah of nesina l'kohen. You may ask me, why don't you make a bracha on the second mitzvah as well, if either Ramban? Oh, very good. You're achmila gavaldik. Just like tzedakah. Yeah, one of the terutzim, just for whatever reason you don't make a bracha on tzedakah, one of the terutzim is yitali b'das acherem, and the person might not take it, so you don't make a bracha by tzedakah. The same will be over here also. But it's two separate mitzvahs. We'll soon see that nesina is not just, nesina means actually giving it to somebody. We'll get to it shortly. Just moment hashevet itself. Why not? If you
get to pick which kohen.
Yeah, but what does it mean? The mitzvah is the nesina. The mitzvah, the nesina, means to give it to the kohen. So by giving it to the kohen, you mafresh it in your house. Then you go over, you walk a few blocks down to the kohen, you give the kohen the dough. So that, giving it to the kohen, that is the mitzvah. The Rambam, it's all part of one big mitzvah. So that we understand, you make a bracha on the mitzvah. You don't make a bracha on every part of the mitzvah, but the Ramban, it's literally two separate mitzvahs. One mitzvah, when you're in your house, you mafresh the challah, you did one mitzvah. Now when you go to the kohen, you hand it over, that's another mitzvah. So why don't you make a bracha on the second mitzvah? The Teretz says, for whatever reason why you don't make a bracha on tzedakah, you don't make a bracha on, some of the reasons at least are applicable over here also. Let's say tali b'das acherem, just like tzedakah, the ani might not take it, and then it's a bracha levatol over here as well. The Ramban says, I have a raya from this week's parsha. He understands the psukim in this week's parsha that these two mitzvahs, there's a mitzvah of afrasha and there's a mitzvah of nesina. The psukim in Shelach L'gabi Challah, the first pasuk, Reishis Arisai Seichem Challah Tarimu Truma. There's one mitzvah of Tarimu, of taking off the Challah. That's the first mitzvah, taking off Challah. And then the next pasuk, Reishis Arisai Seichem Titnu. There's one din of Afrasha, and then there's another din Titnu, giving Titnu Nesina. So we have over here Machlokes Rishonim, the Rambam and the Ramban, in the mitzvah of Challah. Is it one mitzvah with two parts, or is it two separate mitzvahs? Hafrasha and nesina. Now let's move on to the next pointer, and we'll try to see if they're totally the two ideas. The Noidi Yehuda, in his Chuvas, says the following chiddush, and he says the lashon. V'yesh li loymar bazeh davar chadash lo kidmani bezeh shum mefarish a posek. The Rabbi says, I want to say a big chiddush, that in hafrasha there are two dinim. we said till now very clear, either it's one mitzvah, hafrasha and nesina, or it's two mitzvahs. In hafrasha itself, when you take off challah, the Rabbi Yehuda says the following. There's one din that when you mafresh the challah, that hafrasha is mater de isa. You see, if you don't do hafrasha, you're not allowed to eat the dough. It's tevel. That's one din. Then there's another din, besides being mafresh the challah to be mater, there's another din that when you mafresh, this that you're being mafresh, you need to be mafresh to be able to give to the kohen. Meaning to say, for the first din hafrasha, you can even do a little bit, like the Mishnah says, chita achas peiteres esakri. You can even take a little bit, a drop, to be mater the tevel by truma, to be mater the tevel by challah, even a mashu. But then there's another din in hafrasha that you have to take enough. You have to be mafresh enough to be able to give to the kohen. We'll get to the shiur in a minute. Meaning to say is minat Torah, there's a shiur.
It's in one action, you do them both in one
action. Oh, very good, very good. The Rabbi Yehuda's son and his Hagah on the Rabbi Yehuda, beautiful, what you're saying, Yitzchak. You could learn and get geschmack that it's two dinim, these two separate afrashas. You could do it in one shot. You could take a big piece and you makayim the afrasha that's matter and also kedei nesina. But what happens if you took a little bit? So you could understand that you mafresh a little bit that's matter the isa. Then you have to take another afrasha to have enough of a piece to give to the kohen. Why do you have to have a bigger piece? Because you have to have a sheer chash of nesina. These are din titnu to give to the kohen. If you go to the kohen with a kernel, that's not a nesina b'chlal. So you have to have something respectful. We'll see what the sheer is. So Yitzchak's pointing out, maybe we could really get excited over here and say it's these two afrashas. These afrashas to be matter the dough, and then these afrashas to give to the kohen. So for that, the Rabbi Yehuda's son, other achronim also say, of course, there's only one afrasha. And the afrasha accomplishes two things. It accomplishes that the dough is not tevel anymore, and it also accomplishes that you have enough of in the afrasha to give to the kohen. Be'oifen, lu yitzur, somebody did not take enough. He was makayim afrasha. He will not be able to be makayim nesina. You can't do it again. It's mu'uvas to la yochel asakin. You took it off a little bit. It's mutter. You can eat the challah, but it's still giving to the kohen. You can't give. It's only a little bit. You can't give to the kohen. It's one afrosh. It's a chiddush. You could understand these afrosha to be matter and these afrosha to give to the kohen. No, that much already. That's too much. There's no two hafroshas. It's one afrosha that accomplishes two things. It's matter the dough and it's enough to give to the kohen. This chiddush of the Rabbi Yehuda that says that there are two concepts, two accomplishments in the afrasha, which the Rabbi Yehuda says it's his chiddush. Lamaisa, these rishonim that say it already. These are Taisus Rid. And in Derech Hamunah, Reb Chaim Kanevsky brings a pretty big list of rishonim. I guess he didn't have the rishonim. Reb Chaim Kanevsky in Bi'aloch on Derech Hamunah, he brings the Ramchalva, the Yereim, and other rishonim that say that in hafrasha, besides being mafresh, that it's being mater, there's another din also that it should be kashir kedei nesina. What would be the nafkamina, just to make it tangible, this Rabbi Yehuda in the shir hafrasha? We're saying that if you took a little bit, you didn't take the shear, you don't take more. So how do you bring out the Rabbi Yehuda's chiddush that when you're being mafresh, you have to be mafresh a shear to give to the kohen? This itself is the nafkamina, that you have to take off enough of a shear to give to the kohen. One nafkamina is, let's say if the dough is tamei. If the whole reason why you have to be mafresh a big piece is because to give to the kohen, if you're not going to give to the kohen, then you don't have to take a big piece. The kohen himself that's being mafresh. If there's a din nesina, so then you have to be mafresh a big piece. But if there's no din nesina, it's only hafrasha, you can take a mashu. Noda Yehuda says that the Shiur and Hafrasha is only for Nesina in a case that you don't have a Nesina. The dough is Tama, you're not giving it to the Kohen. Or it's a Kohen himself, so there's no Nesina. You can do even a Mashu. The same thing Bizman Hazeh. Bizman Hazeh, that we don't give it to the Kohen. We're Tame, the dough's Tame, we don't give it to the Kohen. So maybe you could do a Mashu.
Before the night that we came along, we were always allowed to do a Mashu, right? Even Bizman Hazeh, and you had no tar. But before the night of Chiddush, that it has to be in a scene, you could have been...
Correct.
So even after the night of Yehuda, you could get out of it if it's stomach.
Right. But I do want to point out, you're saying good, that before the night of Yehuda, so to speak, was B'mashu, and we'll get to that a little more, that the Arish Shainim take a hold like that. The night of Yehuda is speaking in Dairaisa. We're focusing on Torah. With the Rabbanon, that's crystal clear that he's a Shiur, Echad Machav Daled. The Noda Yehuda is saying min ha-Torah, when the mitzvah, which we spoke about in the beginning of the Shiur, that there's a mitzvah of Afrosh and there's a mitzvah of Nesina. The Noda, whether if it's one mitzvah, two mitzvahs, we're not getting involved if it's totally, but there's a mitzvah of Afrosh and there's a mitzvah of Nesina. Says the Noda Yehuda, you need to be mafresh enough to be able to give to the Kohen. Min ha-Torah, in the mitzvah of Afrosh. Everyone agrees with the Rabbanon, he's a Shiur. Min ha-Torah says the Noda Yehuda, he's a Shiur. So for that, but often that is no Nesina, then you're off the hook. A Mashu is enough. A Kohen only does a Mashu if the dough is Tameh a Mashu. Bizman Hazeh, you only take a Mashu.
Even for that other din D'Rabbanan. Even for the din other than D'Rabbanan.
L'maisa, Bizman Hazeh, the Mechaber Taka says a Mashu, the Ramah brings the Minig Api, the Maril, to do a Kazayas. That's taka what we do. When you take Challah, I don't think it makes a difference on the size of the dough. Midrabanan, it's Echad Machav Daled B'Yisar, and we know. But I don't think Bizman Hazeh, usually you make 5, 6, 7 pounds to be Makayim the din Challah. But I think even if it's a huge dough, I think it's also, you just take the same Kazayas. It's just, really, you can even take a Mashu. Midrabanan, in the proper way of taking Challah, for every Isaroin, you take a Echad Machav Dal, Isar 1 of 24, which means if you're going to do 24 Isroinis, then you do a full Isaroin as Challah. But Bizman Hazeh, I think even if you make a huge dough, I think it's only a Kazayas. So those are three nafkaminas, so to speak, with the Noda Yehuda's Chiddush, that the whole Shiur min ha-Torah is only for the Hafrasha, for the Nesina, to the Kohen, but if you're not giving to the Kohen, a Mashu is enough. With this Yesoid, that is a din Nesina min ha-Torah, means he's a Shiur Nesina min ha-Torah, the Sfasemes is miyashav a kasha of Taisvis. The Gemara in Psachim Daf Lamed Beis Amad Beis, there's a machlokes Tanoim in the din when somebody eats truma, b'shoigig, meshalim, keren, v'chaybish. You have to pay not just what you ate, but you also have to add a chaymish. There's a machlokes, how much do you have to eat to mechayiv keren v'chaymish? If you eat a drop, you're not mechayiv. There's a machlokes. Tanakama says you have to eat a kazayas, and Abishol says a shavapruta. Abishol says a shavapruta. The Gemara says machlokes, one need a kazayas because it says v'achal ein achilu pachas mekazayas, and Abishol says v'nosan nesina, you need a nesina kedei shavapruta. Machlokes. Tosfos explains actually that even really Tanakama's maskim that v'nasan really is a shavapruta, but since it says achilo, sabela kazayas, fine. Tosfos asks Akasha, what's pshat in Abishol that you need to have a shavapruta because it says v'nasan? By Truma we find that chita achas poiteres es akri, even not a shavapruta. So Tosfos kasha is, and Tosfos doesn't answer. Tosfos says, Lafi Abishol, why do you have to have a shavapruta? Because the Torah says, v'nasam by truma, chita achas by teres asakri. So the Sfas says, Lafi this Yisoid, that ein nesina pachos, you need to have a nesina davar chashev. So Mela says the Sfas that's why I need a shavapruta, because you need a davar chashev. Just, it's true, Taka, that chita achas by teres asakri, you can take one kernel and it'll be matter everything. However, when it comes to the nesina to the koyin, over there you have to have something chashev, at least a shavapruta. So the Sfas answers Tosfos' kasha why you have to give, how does Abba Shal know shavapruta? Says the Sfas al pidas yisoid that the nesina, there's a din nesina b'shavapruta. Agav, the Sfas says that not always does nesina have to have a shavapruta. There's a din nesina by a get. A get does not have to be a shavapruta. So he says when there's a particular item, then it doesn't have to be a shavapruta. But if there's a general nesina from a dough, from wheat, you need a shavapruta. So we have over here the Noid Behuda that says that the Shiur nesina is min HaTorah. And therefore, when you mafresh, you have to take off a proper Shiur. That's the Chiddush of the Noid Behuda. The Malbim, the Noidi himself explains, but the Malbim elaborates on it and explains that this Shiur nesina min HaTorah is what we're familiar with from the Mishnah Echad B'chav Daled. But like I mentioned before, Echad B'chav Daled is enough even for as big as a dough is. Why? What's the reason why min HaTorah is a Shiur? We're explaining because you can't come to the kohen with a dot, with a little dough, tiny. What is he going to do with it? Echad B'chav Daled B'Isarayin, that's enough that the kohen can do something. At least he can make a roll out of it. So it doesn't make a difference if the person that's making the dough has such a big dough that he can make 5,000 challahs. It doesn't make a difference. As long as the guy comes to the kohen with a decent piece of dough that he can make something out of it, it's enough. That's for sure that midirabanan, it's a dirabanan digadin that every single Yisar you have to take off a piece of challah. The amount of echad misar, echad mechav daled. But in HaTorah you need one piece that's a davar chashem, and that's enough. The Malbim explains, this is relevant to the Parsha, the two psukim. One says reishis arisei seichem, and one pasuk, the pasuk says mei reishis. What's the difference? Reishis arisei seichem, which is talking about the challah, and mei reishis. So he explains that the pasuk, the Panim Yafas, which is that flow, also says this chiddush, that the pasuk is also coming to tell us what happens if you want to take a lot of challah. You want to be very generous. You want to take a ton of challah. So the din is, you could take as much challah as you want. You could take more than the shiur, but there has to be a little bit left over that's not challah. You can't make a dough and you want to be so generous to the kohen and make the whole dough challah. You have to take off challah from the remainder that's not challah. That's the din. You can't make the whole dough challah. Part of it has to be not, part that you leave over is not challah. What happens if a person takes 95% of the dough is challah, takes off challah? Of course it's challah, the remainder is not challah. For that, however, it's meireishis. Why? Because for the 95% of your dough that's challah, you don't have to give the whole thing to the kohen. You have to give to the kohen echad mechav daled, even min HaTorah, like we're saying now. The remainder, you don't even have to give to the kohen. You could sell it to the kohen. It's worth less because you have to eat a betar. You could sell it to the kohen. So, min HaTorah, you have to give kedei nesina echad mechav daled. But the remainder of the dough, which means if you give a bigger hafrashas challah min HaTorah, you're allowed to do it. It's challah, it's kedushas challah. You're now to eat a patuma, but that remainder part you could sell to the kohen. In other words, what we're saying now very clearly, it's an alumnus, it's in din hafrasha, but very clearly, the Torah is mechayev to be mafresh enough to be able to give to the kohen. This yisoid that is a shiur min HaTorah, how much to give to, how much to be mafresh to hainu, how much to give to the kohen, is not so simple at all. Even though the Noid Behuda says that there's a Shiur min HaTorah, which we saw these Rishonim that say like that. There are many Rishonim that argue and that there's no Shiur min HaTorah. The Rambam in Perakei, there's no Rambam in Hilchas Challah, it's Perakei Mebikurim V'shar Matnas Gehuda. The Rambam in the beginning of Perakei, Lashon HaRambam. Mitzvahs asay lahafresh truma min ha'isa lekoyen shenem ha'reishis ha'risa seichem Challah, this week's parsha. V'reisha zu, this mitzvah of Challah, ein lo shiur min HaTorah. There is no shiur. The Rambam says clear, pretty clear, very clear, that there is no shiur min HaTorah. So we have a machlokes rishonim. If there's a Shiur min HaTorah of Afrashas Challah, this week's parsha, you have to be mafresh Challah. Is there a Shiur? The Nachum says it's Rishonim that there is a Shiur, and the Shiur in the Hafrashas to be able to Mekayim Nesina. But other Rishonim say no, there's no Shiur. There is no Shiur. There's no Shiur.
The Nachum doesn't mention this Rambam at all, that it goes not like him?
I don't think so. I went through Nachum. Lamaisa, you're asking good. Lamaisa, the Rambam says clear. There's other Rishonim also. It's a good shayla. So the Nachum is going Shelach Rambam. Lamaisa, just to mention one nekuda about this, that there's no shiur. The Aruch HaShulchan says that even Lafi the Rambam and other Rishonim there is a shiur, and the shiur Zak the Aruch HaShulchan is just like there's a din that if somebody's Torah min ha'ra ala yafa, different dinim in Shruma, you could take it, it's chal, but a person's called, it's a chait, it's chaitei, by chal also. Min HaTorah, of course, like the Mishnah says, you could take a mashu, but that's not, you have to, even if the Rambam, that is a mashu, there's no shiur, but it's chal, but you have to take off a shiur. So it's not mamash akasha and the Nachum. Even the Nachum, he's not going b'dafka that the shiur. He rather says the shiur is echad machavdal, and the Rambam says it's only the rabbanon. But there is some sort of shiur that invited that it should be a kedei nesina l'koyin. So just to conclude the shiur for another minute, we started off the shiur very clearly a machlokes rishonim. This is a good takeaway for Shabbos. Is in the mitzvah of Challah, is it one mitzvah of hafrasha and also nesina? Two parts to the mitzvah, or is it each one a mitzvah f'nei atzma? Hafrasha is a mitzvah and nesina is a mitzvah. That was one thing we spoke about, the rayas. We spoke about another yesod. If in the mitzvahs nesina, and the Rabbi says it's even in the hafrasha, if there's a shiur, machlokes rishonim, if there's a shiur. If there's a shiur, how much you have to give to the kohen? The Minchas Ani says it's mitla tali, these two machlokes rishonim. If you learn that there's two separate mitzvahs, a mitzvah of Afrasha and a mitzvah of Nesina, there's a mitzvah of Nesina, the Nesina has to have a proper shiur. But if you learn like the Rambam, there is no separate mitzvah of Nesina, if you learn that there's no separate mitzvah of Nesina, then there's no shiur. That's what the Minchas Ani wants to say. Lamaisa in Shevet HaLevi, Rab Vosner says it doesn't have to be mitla tali. The Nachum himself says it's not tali. Why? Even if the Rambam, that the Rambam says that it's one mitzvah, but there's two parts. So to be able to makayim the part of the nesina, of course you need a shiur. And even if the Rambam that it's two mitzvahs, if you're going to tell me that you don't need a nesina chashuva, you don't need a nesina chashuva. In other words, the two parts of today's shiur about if it's one mitzvah or two mitzvahs, and about a shiur or no shiur doesn't have to be dependent. Even the Rambam that learns that it's one mitzvah, that one mitzvah could be machayev that you should take off, be mafresh a shiur, chashiv to give to the kohen. Have a wonderful day.